Bello is here with us with doing Top Story, the international edition. Ice baby, gotta go. Good morning, my brother. What's happening? So today I was quite interested in the Horn of Africa because it looks like there's a chunk of stuff going on there. Yeah. So let's first start with Ethiopia and Eritrea.
Okay.
This thing. Do you think, Bello? Let's go very historical. Do you think that the West has created so many problems for us that we are still fighting these problems when we should? It's like somebody puts two brothers at loggerheads and says one thing that this one said is this one said it. Put the two of them at loggerheads and runs and goes sit on top of the wall and watch them fight till they are blue and bloody. Is that what is happening? Why is Eritrea, Ethiopia? What is happening? Because this is supposed to be one people. What is happening in that space?
Good morning to you, Jerry, and good morning to your cherished listeners. I think, first of all, it boils down to, the strategic location of Ethiopia and Eritrea. Historically, they've always overlapped in terms of their governance. At some point in time, Eritrea was part of the Ethiopian Empire.
Yeah.
But then you realize, just like the last time we talked about Afghanistan and the unofficial border between Afghanistan and Pakistan that was inherited from the British India.
Exactly. Here we go.
Ethiopia wasn't colonized. But Ethiopia was compelled to cede out Eritrea to the Italians in order to thwart further colonial ambitions.
Exactly.
And it was part of the misinterpretation of the treaty that ceded Eritrea that caused the Abyssinian-Italian War.
Exactly.
And the Battle of Adwa of, I think, is it 1893, if I'm not mistaken. And the ultimate defeat of the Italians. So there's always been that need to kind of have control. And I remember the Eritrean Civil War, when after independence there was a referendum where the monarchists won and Eritrea was incorporated or federated with Ethiopia.
Yes, the federation.
Yeah. But then 10 years later it was annexed.
Because when the federation happened, the federation was supposed to last for a period, right? And then after they were going to go independent. And then your people said, what? What was the story? Give me that story.
The idea was that since colonialism forced Ethiopia to cede,
it was always ours.
Yeah. So there was this referendum that let the Eritreans themselves decide where they want to be. The monarchists who wanted integration with Ethiopia won. But of course, due to the colonial administration and colonial experience, there was some variation in terms of experience, in terms of governance. So Eritrea was federated with Ethiopia, but given internal control.
Yes, they had their own
parliament.
Parliament.
But for Haile Selassie, whose idol has always been Menelik, he felt the need to restore what he felt was humiliation imposed on Ethiopia.
By the Italians.
So he annexed Eritrea proper.
That is for me already.
And disbanded, the structures that were created during the, incorporation. And that led to civil war that lasted until 1993.
Exactly.
But in the course of the civil war, the most formidable fighting element were the Eritreans.
Exactly.
Led by Isaiah Afwerki. And then Meles Zenawi, a Tigrayan.
Yeah.
From Tigray region. Before the addition of the emergence of other ethnic militias. So at 93, when, the Mengistu regime was overthrown, there was a final referendum and Eritrea ceded.
Exactly.
But because of the longevity of the Tigrayans in the struggle, they dominated the system.
Yep.
So whilst they represent just 6% of Ethiopian population, they were the most dominant element within the post-Mengistu government. And we saw the longevity of Meles Zenawi.
Yeah.
But then he created an ethnic federalism where each region is controlled by ethnic groups within that region. So to have a say at the center, you must have a formidable front, base at home.
Exactly.
But historically, people attach Ethiopia to Christianity due to the dominance
of the Ethiopian Orthodox
of the
Church.
Solomonic dynasty
Exactly,
and the
yeah.
Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
Yeah. The whole story of the Queen of Sheba visiting
But a huge chunk of
Solomon.
a huge chunk of Ethiopian population is actually Muslim.
Okay.
Abiy Ahmed is an Oromo.
Okay.
The Oromos are divided 60% Muslim, 40% Christians. Abiy Ahmed has a Muslim father, a Christian mother. Even Haile Selassie himself has a Muslim grandmother.
Okay.
So that's the first misconception about Ethiopia. Secondly, the dominance of the system by the Tigrayans was detested by the Amhara, who have been the historic monarchical class.
Exactly, yeah.
So for them, any loophole they see, they must seek to govern.
Okay.
And then you have the Ogaden region, which is made up of ethnic Somalis.
Yeah.
And you can't remember the Ogaden War.
The Ogaden War, yeah.
So these are some of the contexts that created the war. So with the death of Meles Zenawi, Mengistu Haile Mariam came to the scene. But then, when strong men go, there's always a power struggle.
Of course.
So a protest emerged in Oromia region, led by the Oromos.
So all of this is happening, listeners, in Ethiopia.
Ethiopia.
We are not talking to Eritrea yet. No. Good.
Then joined, the Amhara joined, and this constituted the two largest ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
When Abiy came, he realized that under Meles Zenawi, the regional government were technically more stronger than the central government.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to realign or reconstitute the arrangement. And then the Tigrayans took up arms because they felt they were being sidelined at the center. So you have, the Britian, Gabriel Michael.
Okay.
The former leader of the TPLF, who led the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, they were successful in kicking out the Ethiopian Defense Forces, National Defense Forces, out of Tigray. Then, Abiy Ahmed invited the Eritreans on his side. Because one thing, having been...
That for me, what you just said, for me, is the crust of this discussion. So what you're saying is that, although the Eritreans went independent, as the Ethiopians started having internal issues and Tigray started having power and the TPLF became powerful, the Ethiopians, that in that sense, the government, then went back to their former brothers who had gone independent and say, come join me, let's fight my people.
There's always been enmity between
the Tigrayans and the Eritreans.
Eritreans. But you see, when you look at even Eritrea itself, the Tigray ethnic groups are more, they're dominant.
They spread into that side.
Yeah. You know, even when Eritrea ceded, there was this border war, the Badme border dispute. And so Abiy Ahmed, first thing he did was he extended an olive branch to Eritrea to resolve the border dispute.
Mm-hmm.
So that was how he was able to get a good relationship with the Eritrean president. So he realized that the Tigrayans are very good, dogged guerrilla fighters. Historically, they've always been the saviors.
Of course.
Of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Because every incursion into Ethiopia comes from the north. Even the other war occurred in Tigray.
Yeah. So historically, it's
then
been a hotspot.
Whilst people give Menelik the credit for defeating the Italians, yeah, as a leader, he deserves the credit.
Get the credit.
But the biggest brain behind the defeat or the success of Ethiopians was actually a Tigrayan.
Yeah.
Ras Alula.
Mm.
And beside the Italians, he defeated the Egyptians. He defeated the Ottomans.
No, I mean the Tigrayans historically massive.
So
now Eritrea will be interested in joining Ethiopia, like you're saying, for this war against the Tigrayans, because they also have Tigrayans in their side. So if they allow the Tigrayans in Ethiopia to win and go solo, they will join with those on their side.
Probably they also
and cut. Yeah. Thank you very much.
So it was this Ethiopian internal problem that has a lot of security implication for its neighbor. So they became allies. And then aside the national armed forces, each region had its own militias.
That for me is the problem in the Horn of Africa.
You see,
too many.
It dates back to how the revolt against Mengistu succeeded. Each ethnic group formed its own militias. So at the time of at the end of the Civil War, they were not disarmed. Some portion of them were transferred to the central government. They formed the Ethiopian National Defense Force. But each regime maintained its armed element.
Okay.
And that's how come the Tigrayans were able to fight. Because all they did was to withdraw their support from the central government, turn their arms against their former benefactors. So aside the Eritreans, you had the Amara Special Forces.
Okay. Yes.
Who were fighting at the time. You had elements from Oromo, like, easy. And it was like, because of the dominance of the Tigrayans for over 3 decades, there was this animosity towards them that may boil out of proportion or be exaggerated, because an ordinary Tigrayan might not have committed any crime against any other ethnic group.
Okay.
But the fact that some Tigrayans were leading and seem to have abused their powers in terms of ethnic politics or politics of identity, you suffer the consequence of the action of a few of your
So
kids.
now, let's come to the substantive issue. Has there been genocide?
Well, during the war, we saw the use of starvation, blocking of aid. No, what do you call it? The Tigrayans were forced to surrender, but they weren't defeated on the battlefield. It's just like the Germans in the World War I. You know, Germany fought and had the last 1 million soldiers to send to the battlefront. Aside that, there will be no more boots on the ground.
Okay.
So the Kaiser was forced to sign armistice and abdicate. And that was what Hitler came to term as the stab in the back, where he said the Germans were not defeated on the field, but the Jewish influence persuaded the Germans, monarchies, and the leaders at the time to sign the surrender.
Because, I mean, I saw this report I was looking through yesterday, where it said that a report by an American-based institution, the New Lines Institute, indicates that Ethiopia's NDF and its backers, the EDF, so there's the EDF and then NDF, and the Amhara Special Forces committed genocide against Tigrayans. And the 3 organizations are believed to have committed at least 4 acts of genocide, killing the Tigrayans, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions on Tigrayans calculated to bring about their destruction, and imposing measures intended to prevent births among Tigrayans.
So if you look at it through the lens of Gaza,
What?
If you look at it through the lens of Gaza today, the scale might not be the same,
As big as, yeah.
but the intent will probably sound the same.
Not only are we inflicting harm on you, we're even ensuring that you don't even give birth, so that there won't be a next generation.
If you look at the negotiation in South Africa, one of the part of conditioning in the agreement was that aid will be allowed in. So if we are negotiating the allowance of aid to come into the territory, it means there was a blockade of aid in the first place.
Yeah, we'll starve you to death.
Yeah, without the blockade, there would be need to negotiate the scale of aid that will come into the territory. So for me, once there's a deliberate blockade of aid, of food, water, medical supplies that are crucial to the survival of an ethnic group, whether we call it a genocide, a massacre, regardless of the nomenclature we give to it, it's still a crime
against humanity.
So my only problem would be that I am not a believer in the ICC. So long as the West that teaches the rule of law,
They
are now trying to put context. As an African, I think AU should take the initiative, properly investigate the report, because we also have to carry out our own investigation. Giving fair hearing to all the parties involved, the Amhara Special Forces, the Amhara Regional Government, the Ethiopian government, the Eritrean government, and the Tigrayans themselves, through the same mechanism that was used to resolve the conflict. Let's do proper investigation. If the findings suggest that yes, there was a genocide, then we also need to investigate the scale. Is it in the same scale that the report has given, below the threshold of the report or above the threshold of the report? Then we have AU, Commission for Peace and Justice. Also, I think we have an institution that's supposed to deal with that. And AU Peace and Security Council. We have AU Council on Justice, I think. Then we should try the culprits in Africa, by Africans, for Africans.
Bello, are we not going to sit some years to come, and the Tigrayans would have arisen again, and this time more powerful? Have they been completely defeated?
I think for now they have surrendered. They have been integrated. But what we need to do is that the question should rather be, has Abiy Ahmed really proven to be what he was, what he
He said he was good. Yeah,
every dictator was once a reformer.
That's a very powerful one. So I wouldn't want to even go into it. Let that sink in. Every dictator was once a reformer. Now let's extend, still within the Horn of Africa region, Kenya, non-NATO ally status.
Yeah, the first sub-Saharan African.
First sub-Saharan.
It looks like a good news.
Oh, looks like?
Yeah.
Is it not?
But it's a bad news for Africa.
Especially in the area of when we are now trying to get together, AU after coming together. Why are we getting Big Brother White Man to come and help?
Is we becoming pawn in an emerging geopolitical rift between the Western countries on one side and Russia and China? And we should avoid being aligned. Alignment is what we should avoid.
Nkrumah didn't want to.
Our founding fathers didn't want to be aligned.
Yeah, no, they didn't want to.
Even those who were more closer to the West, like the Nigerian government and the Tafawa Balewa, were very cautious not to be aligned because it is detrimental to our interests.
So what happened to the NAM? What happened to NAM?
With the end of the Cold War, NAM became a bit irrelevant because NAM was very active as a balancing, call it, act within the Cold War.
Okay.
So I think with the emerging rift we are seeing today and the rising competition rather than cooperation,
we might need to bring NAM back.
NAM will become more active with the time. But the significant difference this time around is that unlike the past where Soviet Union was militarily a match for NATO, but economically less formidable, you have a China that is both economically.
Yeah. So no one is going to be bullied.
And probably militarily aggressively catching up.
Yeah.
But a combination of China and Russia becomes a dangerous, escalation. Because regardless of how you look at Russia, if you put in proper context that Russia has been fighting NATO on Ukrainian territory for 2 years with relative support of weaker countries like North Korea and Iran.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you hear what Putin said yesterday.
And it's able to stand a combined alliance of not less than 30 members. It tells you the strength of the Russian fighting machine. That is one. Then expand this to the African continent. I mean, why should you always be involved with people's conflict? I have a problem with that. So for me, personally, I don't think it's a good news. And then one of the arguments that was cited is that it is because of Kenya's crucial role.
Yeah, Kenya is not big brother in
the
space.
Fight against Al-Shabaab. But Kenya's biggest mistake was intervening in Somalia in the first place. You can't remember, was it 2015 or which year did Ethiopia actually invaded Somalia to oust the Union of Islamic Courts?
Okay.
The question is, why did Ethiopia took the first step? Barclay withdrew early.
And then Big Brother Kenya
and transferred the responsibility to African Union and African country when they weren't aware of its initial step. Because historically, the Somalians and the Ethiopians are mortal enemies. Religion play a role. The Christian Solomonic dynasty against the Islamic Somali states. History of colonialism, where the Somalis felt that Ogaden was ceded to Ethiopia by the Britain without their consent. You had the same in Kenya, the Shifter War.
Exactly.
Where the ethnic Somalis in a referendum, just like we had over the Transvolta Togoland.
Exactly, yeah.
Voted to actually join Somalia. But they weren't, the result wasn't recognized by the British. And for lack of a better word, to a certain extent, the Kenyan central government has not really incorporated its ethnic Somalis properly into the system. They still feel like marginalized.
Yeah.
So with this historic animosity, it was the blunder for Kenya to have even sent troops in the first place. Ask yourself, was Kenya the only neighboring country with troops in Somalia, what was Kenya giving a dose of its own pill in the Westgate Mall? And may the soul of Awuno rest in peace.
Yeah, we lost a prominent Ghanaian in that disaster.
All because the historic animosity made Kenya a more legitimate target. One, for genuine grievances. Secondly, for PR sake. If you're able to attack Kenya, which has been your mortal enemy, it gives you the potential to gather more recruits.
We can't talk Kenya and what they are doing in the Horn without talking about the fact that as part of this thing, they are even going to get some money as they go to Haiti.
So that was how I was going. It was more like rewarding them for going to Haiti. But the question is, why are they going to Haiti?
Why are they going to Haiti?
Why are they going to Haiti to do America's dirty work?
Why are they going to Haiti?
America has had history of intervention in Haiti. Prior to that, we have the humiliation of the Haitians themselves. You know, Haiti was the richest slave colony on earth. And when it was gaining independence, for its independence to be recognized, the enslaved was forced to compensate its oppressor. And the amount of money that Haiti had to give to France as compensation for the plantation owners was what sowed the seed of the current disaster in Haiti.
Now they're the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, you get the point. Now, having failed in its interventions, U.S. is trying to internationalize the intervention.
Yeah, saying this. Then Kenya said, I'll send people there.
So they want to be the hidden hand behind the scene. But it gave them some logistic. I think they had about 15 helicopters. No, 16 helicopters, if I'm not mistaken, and some 47 Guardian, American vehicles, and more military aid. Yeah, military aid will come in, but then Kenya being an aligned country becomes a problem. So it becomes a foothold of U.S. in the Horn of Africa. But then, aside Kenya, mind you, Djibouti is a contested zone where almost every country has a military base.
Yeah.
And
this is interesting because I'm looking at it this way, that part of Africa, especially within our space, is going Russia, if I could put it that way. And then Kenya is saying, no, William Ruto is going to White House and sitting actually on the chair in the Oval Office. And there's a picture of him and Biden in the Oval Office and all that. Let's go beyond. Last one, Sudan. What's happening with the Rapid Support Force?
It goes back to AU's role in Africa, on African continent. We are reactionary, not proactive. We react to issues. We are reactive, not proactive in the first place. You see, with the ouster of Omar al-Bashir, we should have thrown our weight behind the pro-democracy activists. Because for the first time in my life, I saw a group of people who were not afraid of the guns.
Okay.
Remember the Sudanese civilians besieged the headquarters of the Sudanese armed forces and placed the army under siege without a single bullet in their arms. And what did we do when we got to the negotiating table? They were compelled to accept a fait accompli, which is very simple. Yeah, the military guys have the power, so you share power with them. At the time, the military was under pressure. So I don't understand the rationale behind the negotiation that gave the military the control of the Sovereignty Council and gave the civilians the control of the premiership. And then you saw the first coup that ousted the civilian government, orchestrated by these two elements. And now their personal interest between Hemeti and Burhan has created this.
Hey, the Rapid Support Forces, how come they look uncontrollable? In fact, one report I read said they behave like a gang of raiders. And they are going through the countryside just raiding.
First of all, they originate from an ethnic Arab militia called the Janjaweed.
The Janjaweed.
That were infamous for their atrocities against
I remember the Janjaweed.
fellow Sudanese.
Scary guys.
People say Africans. First of all, let's be very frank. The people they were killing were their compatriots, fellow Sudanese. Secondly, the ethnic issue is that they were killing non-Arabs.
Okay.
Regardless of your faith. Because the Masalit are equally Muslim dominated, but they were not spared. And then the black Christians and all over. But then their role was expanded from Darfur into the central, the rest of the country, and Khartoum precisely, by Omar al-Bashir to coup-proof his regime. create a counterweight to the military.
Okay.
Along the line, he sidelined the Islamists like Hassan Turabi. Like Turabi, the Turabis were sidelined,
Yes.
so along the line. So he felt that with the RSF, Rapid Support Forces, he was able to prevent a coup d'etat. Yes, it worked. But along the line, the RSF equally sold him out because it was the RSF backing or refusal to defend him that allowed the coup to succeed in the first place.
Okay.
And then, so what happened is that, what do you call it? Structurally wise, the RFS is more suitable for the kind of war we have in Sudan today.
They are nomads, right? Yeah. So moving across borders.
When they were nationalized, expanded in the role, they were given a lot of training in internal security.
Here we go.
And they were positioned in strategic location within Khartoum, rather than the army. The army was just within its headquarters and few of its barracks. But because it is an internal security force in the first place, and a second hand or a checkmate against coup d'etat, they were positioned strategically within Khartoum. And that's why when the war started, they were able to dominate in Khartoum. But if you look at the like of Port Sudan, Dumar, and other parts, the Sudanese armed forces have gained upper hand.
Yeah.
But the Sudanese armed forces is structured to fight conventional warfare.
Yeah.
Whilst the RPF is trained for urban control. That's why you see them having dominance within the Khartoum. But then recently they've been under a lot of pressure around the Port Sudan area. And then they are losing grounds in Dumar. And that will probably affect their position within Khartoum. So they are trying to strengthen their hands. It's a bargaining chip. The stronger, you see, every war itself is politics because politicians create the war. Generals and soldiers do the fighting and the dying. Politicians still come to the table to negotiate at the end of the war. So war itself is politics. So it's about negotiating tactics. Who has the upper hand on the battlefield? So now, if you look at the agreement between US and Taliban, you realize that it was Taliban's strength in the battlefield that allowed them to call the shot.
Do you believe they are operating in Yemen as well? There are reports that they are in Yemen as well.
They were operating in Yemen, and that's how they were able to build a relationship with the UAE. So now the fight in Sudan has become more like a regional war, where you have UAE and Russia backing, RSF, and then you have Iran, and to a certain extent, a few more countries, like Saudi Arabia, backing Burhan. But first of all, the biggest casualty in this war itself is the Sudanese people.
Why does the RSF always go for its own people? What does that achieve? When you are going after your own people, what does that achieve? Help me understand.
It's a logic of fear.
Okay.
You remember...
the same people you come and rule later.
You remember the short sleeve, long sleeve, and scenarios we had in Sierra Leone?
Yeah, in Rwanda.
The question, no, in Sierra Leone.
Yes, in Sierra Leone, okay.
The question is, why were they doing it? Just to instill fear into the heart of the people.
Then you come and rule them after.
They fear general uprising.
So they won't come after you okay, that makes sense now. Scare them so much that...
But the question is, now, having done this, you've compelled either to old enemies to become allies. So the former rebels, like Mini Minawi, are now fighting with the Sudanese military. Some pro-democracy activists have joined the military. They form civil defense corps, right? So you're guarding your enemy against you. And now we've seen that one of the things that give the Sudanese army upper hand in Dumar was because of the supply of the Iranian drones. Now, I think the Sudanese defense minister was in Russia somewhere last week or a week earlier. So now with the Sudanese army getting support externally in terms of weapons, plus the domestic support, because you see, traditionally the Sudanese don't trust the military because Omar al-Bashir was from the military. He ruled for 30 years, abused his power, a lot of oppression. But in between, the RSF, which is seen as a rogue army.
Are they not? When you say which is seen as Bello, are they not?
Well, they have legal backing per the constitution within the state architecture.
Of course,
so
yes.
we can't, legally they are not rogue. But
practically
they are rogue.
Yes.
Post facto, they are rogue.
Yes.
And then the RSF, the Sudanese people tend to trust the army because of its national outlook. Then the RSF, which is dominated by just element from the nomadic Arab element from Darfur, which lack national outlook, one, which lacks the sophistication and what do you call it? Should I say the razzmatazz of the modern world? Because they have this Puritan, primitive, for lack of a better word. Okay, let me just withdraw that. More traditional, more nomadic settings. I think that probably be a best expression. So the Sudanese people are now forced to choose in between their two enemies. The army you mistrust, and the RSF you dislike. So the question is, aside negotiation for peace in Sudan, they must be dovetailed with negotiation for a democratic transition. Only the Sudanese would have to determine the form of government they want, be it Islamist, be it secular, be it a blend of the two.
Where is the breakaway region in all of this conversation?
The South Sudan.
Exactly.
South Sudan
is sitting there and watching the big brother and saying, now you're in trouble.
Well, it's trying to be a negotiator because it needs to channel its oil through the pipelines.
Yeah.
Until it gets an alternative in Kenya.
It needs money.
Yeah, and secondly, it preferred to deal with the Sudanese armed forces than to deal with the RSF because, one, historically, the South Sudanese rebels were once part of the larger Sudanese armed forces.
Yeah.
Regardless of the animosity, they have the same training from the British colonial master.
They understand each other.
And then what do you call it? The Egyptians. So there's more understanding between them. It's more like a mistrust, but there's an understanding.
We know each other.
Yeah, we know each other. Than a nomadic rogue militia.
Janjaweed.
Rogue militia with a massacre on its track record. Coming
crazy.
to the center.
Bello, final words. What do you see happening in the Horn of Africa in the next few years?
Well, I tend to see an intensity of the competition. Mind you, the Turkish are also there.
Is it so heavily resourced, or is it just where they are placed?
No.
Is it a location issue or a resource issue?
A lot of hydrocarbons are there.
Okay.
Within the shores of Somalia. It's a strategic fishing, outpost. You get the point?
Yeah.
So now the Chinese are there in the name of anti-piracy operation. Somalia Turkey has a base in Somalia. UAE is trying to secure a foothold in this breakaway Somaliland, unrecognized because they've been governing themselves effectively since 1990s. And then you have Ethiopia also trying to get a passage to the sea. Ethiopia itself looking for access to the sea, not trying to recognize Somaliland.
So you see intensity,
and that has also raised create a friction between Ethiopia and the Somali central government. So it's both an internal issue that Africa will have to confront, and it's a hydra-headed monster that the world will also have to confront, because there must be some kind of understanding among the global players in the region to prevent violence, outbreak of conflict, and there must be proactive intervention by AU to prevent a disaster for Africa, because our interest is what matters first.
Exactly.
I don't care about what happened to the Chinese in Somalia. I don't care what happened. No. I should be looking out for my own brother.
Exactly.
Because they also look out for their own brothers. And history has shown. In Rwanda, we saw what they did. Everybody was packing the citizens, leaving us to butcher each other. It only took the intervention of the Ghanaian. I think one of our own battalion in what do you call it, Rwanda, stood their ground. And I always ask a question that if we don't learn from the past, we'll suffer. We saw it in Rwanda, we saw it across very well. Even in Liberia, Sierra Leone, it took ECOWAS intervention. Everybody just kept quiet. So it simply means that everybody in geopolitics, interest matters. The only thing that will matter to Africa, it is we that will look at humanity.
That's from Bello. The only thing that matters is that we look at our own people, watch our own back. That's Alhassan Bello, is our international politics correspondent right here on Z 101.9 FM. Thank you so much, my brother, for coming through. We should do this again next week.
Sure.
Because the whole continent, there's so many things we need to discuss. Yes. Thank you so much. It's just about 7 minutes past 8. Yes.